Howdy folks, Rudrose here, and today we are going to be looking at some of the top decks from the Disney Lorcana Challenge European Championship. I don't believe these are in full order. As you can see here, we have 1 through 3, but then these all just say top 8. This would technically only be top 6, so this isn't everything, but I at least wanted to look at some of the different ink combinations and just see what people were running, what was doing well, especially since Ruby Amethyst won, which is my personal favorite deck, one I've been a very big fan of. So let's just have some fun, look through it. If you haven't already, don't forget to give a like and subscribe. It really makes a difference in the channel. I appreciate it so much. So this was our winning list by Domingo Martinez. And this is Ruby Amethyst. Looks pretty solid, pretty standard. It makes me happy to see lists like this still performing well, as every set you always hear from so many creators and authorities on the game and high-level players, oh, Ruby Amethyst is dead. I think I heard on the Lorcana podcast, it might not have been them, but I heard from somewhere that they were like, well, Ruby Amethyst, it's just a bunch of good cards. It doesn't really have any great cards. That's why it just gets weaker every set. And yet here it is saying, yeah, no, stuff it, buddy, because I'm actually doing great. Pretty standard with the Chernobog's Magic Broom. I'm a little surprised Diablo isn't in here. I do like him quite a bit. The downside of these cards is if you run into Steel Song and they just get rid of it with a Storm Rage on, you don't get any value off of it, whereas Diablo, you're guaranteed to get at least a card draw. However, that card is very bad into aggro, so depending on what you're anticipating, like if they have a Cursed Merfolk or even just any tiny card you need to put a little damage on, these can at least put some damage on, whereas Diablo does nothing. Classic Flynn, Madam Mim package, yeah, this looks pretty standard. I was pretty much right about Genie and Rabbit in that people have not just dropped the Rabbit. They're like, let's just do more. Let's just add in Genie. We'll do even more card draw. Now we have the pressure one, and then we have the one we can bounce forever to keep our hand advantage. That's kind of fun to see. Belle, I'll get to in a second because that's probably the biggest change. One of Sisu, I've tried this so many times in the past. For me, I just always bricked. I would always draw it early. I would never even get to shift it. I also just think this card is overall it's a lot weaker without a card like Ice Block, where you can manipulate values and take what was something with 3 strength down to 2 and let the Sisu kill it. So I still really favor this card in red-blue over this version, but again, depending on what you're going against, if you expect to go against a lot of low strength characters, it's still a board wipe, and it's one that potentially you can get a turn earlier than B-Prep. Other than that, pretty standard. Pretty much have to have 4 of these. 3 is fine with a Sisu. And yeah, so the Belle's the big thing. At first, I found this just kind of strange, but essentially it was used as a Genie counter. What people would do is, so if they have a Genie, you have a Genie, you attack with your Genie into theirs. Normally that wouldn't kill it, right? You'd each just take 2 damage. But then you bring the Belle down on the next turn, on that turn 5, and you can move the 2 Genie you took onto their Genie. That seemed to be the most prominent use for it. Other than that, a 4/4 that quests for 2 is never bad. Potentially has an interesting entry effect. But yeah, so the big thing I've noticed about all these lists is that most of them, not all of them, we do have one here, which we're going to see, a lot of them have cut the Queen's Castle, have cut locations. I even still run the library in some of mine because I really like that card. And I don't think the castle is bad. As we can see, this list, I think, which one is this? This is by Contra Drago. So this is 3rd. So 3rd place was a list running the Queen's Library. So clearly this card is still just fine. It's inkable, yes. Sometimes, I think the thing with locations is that if they answer it the turn you play it, it's pointless, right? It doesn't do anything. If they can Fox Crab or just Maui with something else and it's immediately gone, or the new Maui Half Shark can take it out in 1 hit. That's not very good. But in those situations, I tend to ink it. I actually like the castle a lot more. They're used later in the game than earlier. So there's this fabled line of, turn 1, whatever, Flynn or Chernobog's Broom, turn 2 Flynn, turn 3 Sisu, turn 4 Castle. If you're going first and you can put all that out and they just can't answer those cards, you usually just won the game. However, lately I've kind of been favoring the castle later in the game. I like backing it up with something like Be Prepared, where it's like, okay, here's the castle. Now I've wiped out your whole board, and I can actually just control with Be Prepared and removal that you're now not hitting this castle on my board. So I still like castle a lot. But maybe if this meta is really heavy with Fox and Crabs and just things that are going to take it out, maybe it's okay to drop it for now. Or maybe you're that person, you keep pushing the castle and you're going to take some people by surprise as other people thinking these lists are going to drop the Queen's Castle, and now you can kind of catch them by surprise. So here's our 2nd place list. Good old green purple. Again, no locations in this one. This list also used to run Queen's Castle and Library. We're on, gosh, look at all those 1-drops. What do we have? 12 plus 15 1-drops. I run 10 in my personal list, and I always thought that felt kind of high. But this, unless you have insanely terrible luck, you shouldn't be whiffing on a 1-drop in this case. And it's, what is it? It's card draw, card draw, card draw, lore. Card draw, card draw, card draw, lore. That's everything this deck wants. Only, or down to a single bonsai. That's really interesting. So this, our 2-drops are the Go-Go, which essentially is like lore later in the game. Ursula, still rocking the snake. I actually took it out of one of the lists I was trying because I wasn't trying to bounce my merfolk. And a lot of kit. I do kind of like this mid-rangey style. I do enjoy this. Other than that, crabs, foxes, still running a Peter Pan, help you answer Diablos. Helps foxes challenge a genie too, which I really like. Right? Or is it the other one? No, it's the other one. Sorry, you would need to run the shadow to have the fox challenge it. But it does mean your genie can get rushed. I guess that's not terrible. White Rose, of course, very good. Yeah, this just looks pretty standard. Still running one single Ursula. It's very interesting. It's cut the Clarabelle package entirely, which granted, it took you a while to get to that big Clarabelle, but I guess essentially Genie, and I guess to a lesser extent Diablo, have replaced this, right? Well, why do you need to go in on that big Clarabelle when these characters are now drawing you cards immediately? So, yeah. Good stuff. Again, my Rabbit Genie prediction held true that Rabbit is not worth abandoning at all, especially against the red-blue, which I play a lot. Trust me, I've had so many Genies that I play them and they immediately get banished, which means it was worse Rabbit. It's better Rabbit if it can stick around and keep questing. But yeah, very solid deck, very tight. Same bell probably for that Genie on Genie play we described earlier. Go-Go's worth her weight in gold. Really, again, as long as you get 2 lore off of her, she's basically a goat. And then any more than that is just... chef's kiss. Good list. Very, very solid. Here's Ruby Amethyst again. Pretty similar. This one is actually running White Rose, which I like. I kind of like that one. So the big differences here are we're running the castle. We are running Dragonfire, just 1 copy, but I'm a big fan of that. There are just some matchups, and again, I play a lot of red-blue. When a Tamatoa comes down, if he either has to be alone so you can drop Tremaine on him, or you had to use Be Prepared. So it's kind of nice to have an alternative. The Elsa... I don't know. The only deck I really like this card in is Blurple. I understand you can shift it onto the Celsa, but I also think this Elsa is probably good enough. I don't know if you necessarily want to have to shift on it. This one was going full in on the Rabbit package and just playing 1 Genie. This list looks a little more like it's prepared for red-blue. This one seems more like it's ready against some of the low-to-the-ground decks, and this one, I think, looks a little better into a red-blue matchup. So I would probably favor this personally at my own locals, but again, I have to face a bunch of red-blue. If you're not having to deal with Ruby Sapphire, maybe the other version's better for you. So overall, this one looks fun. I do like the tech of the Dragonfire. What do we got next? Speaking of red-blue, we've mentioned it several times. See, pretty standard. Maui Half Shark. This is probably the best deck for it. All the big bodies. Down to 1 hideaway. Again, kind of feeling out that a lot of people are dropping locations. Sail is such a strong card. Vision. No Gathering Knowledge, which is... Or, yeah, is it not Gathering Knowledge? What's the other one? The 1-drop. Develop Your Brain. That's it. Really good with Sail, because it's another 1 you can put out after you've inked the second time with Sail. And it's a really good card for Maui Half Shark. You can just get easy lore that way. Running 3 of the little Sisu, so definitely anticipating a lot of small aggro threats. And of course can shift onto the big one. It's so interesting ramp-wise. These lists have just cut out Fishbone Quill. I mean, there was a time I thought Fishbone Quill could be worthy of a ban because it was the only card that let you ramp and still keep like an active ink, ready to ink, that it didn't come in exerted like all these others do. But now Sail is just completely overtaken that. So yeah, Sail, Tipo are our main ways. How Far I'll Go is a bit of a later one. Still 1 Great Stone Dragon. Again, really good in those really long grindy games. 2 Shield of Virtue, really good even for something like just Maui, having him take down a McDuck Manor, attack, ready him, attack again. It's pretty nice. Yeah, this list looks fun. Down to a single Lucky Dime. I'll tell you what, I've seen some lists that don't run any Lucky Dimes because they get so much lore through the Maui Half Shark. So it's possible if you really go in on this card that's just an alternate win condition, you can see how much we are favoring the ice blocks though, as this lets us all of our removal, which they're not running Medusa. That is so interesting. How many uninkables is this list? So 1, 2, only a single Be Prepared. I don't know about that. Here's 3 is 5, plus 4 is 9. plus another 4, 13, plus 3, 16 uninkables, which is actually pretty low for red-blue. Man, no Medusa in an ice block list. Maybe they just felt like they didn't need it. Maybe by the time they were on Medusa, they were already ramping high enough to get to this other stuff, or the Shark was worth it, and you've got Vitalosphere to give them Rush, even though it's just a 1 copy. That's interesting. That's really interesting. That'd be the one part I would be kind of nervous about, but he made it work. How about that? Thinking about it, too, if you're running a full 4 ice block, maybe you don't need Medusa as much, because now Brawl kind of is Medusa without a body. Normally, the weakness of this card is it's very limited in what it can hit, but again, ice block lets you just manipulate stat values so much. Here is the fabled purple and gray. This color combination has really shown up a lot this set. People are really digging this now. New Calhoun. Pluto is such a great card to fit in there. Genie fits really well in this instead. So let's see. We got our Sweet and 1-drops. Pretty typical. Calhoun is such a strong card. This card, I do find this card to be a little annoying, but I was thinking about it. I think if they changed even a single number on her, she would be, I don't think you'd play her. So like, let's say she was a 2-2 instead of a 3-2. Would you play her? Probably not. There's a lot of stuff she suddenly doesn't hit. What if she didn't have resist +1? I don't think you'd play it because now it dies to a storm. What if it costs 3? Now when you're getting to turn 3, which means she can't challenge till turn 4, stuff is starting to get out of the range that she can take out. So I think they just to make her playable, I think they nailed her. Smee, Lawrence, Pluto's so obnoxious. Pete, of course, very important. Crab, Fox, pretty standard stuff. Genie, very good way to apply lore pressure and get card draw. More bells, we're seeing that. Elsa, Fire the Cannons, of course, a big one. Seeing Smash come back in, there is a lot of cards with 3 health now. It can deal with an opposing Calhoun, takes out a Smee, can mess up a Lawrence or a Pluto so you can more easily finish them off, takes out a Crab, a Pete. Doesn't quite finish a Genie off, is kind of the downside, but yeah, no Baboom. Realize, we're going for the Fire the Cannons instead, just like we have to have that early shot. Zeus, of course, I still like. This deck is running Library, which is another way to keep boosting your card draw. Hades, I have yet to see this card work. I've been casting the Cross-Continental Challenges, and there's a few decks running the Hades, and every single time it comes down, it's banished before anything else. Like, the only time I think this card makes any sense is if they have to be prepared. Be prepared is the only way they get out of this turn. I've just never seen it work, so I would expect to see this one get cut a lot, just because, again, I never see it do anything. Surely there's something better we can do here, in Inkable something. But overall, yeah, this looks solid. This looks fun. I don't really have any questions or concerns about this. I do like the Smash. It seems to be maybe a better card at this moment than Baboom. Stuff just getting tankier and tankier. Here's another version. This one running the Hook. So we have a couple more 1-drops. Is going to give us some better challenging power. Calhoun, Doc is good for refilling your hand when you're empty. This one on the White Rose and on the Tinkerbell, as well as the Shift. I always kind of forget about this line. I'm so used to Tinkerbell not having a target in purple that, oh yeah, she's got something she can shift into. We have the big Gantu now too. I do like Gantu. Is he good? Maybe this is another reason you're seeing the Smashes, so people can just knock out a Gantu. If you quest with him once, that 4 lore. Strength of Raging Fire. Running some castles too. So this one's like, it's not that it's more low to the ground. It just really has different tech choices. This one probably has a little more control and maybe a little higher top end with Tinkerbell and Gantu versus this one. This one's top end is basically these two. I don't really count Hades. So this one's a little more top end late game, but I kind of like that. Wouldn't mind seeing a few Zeus in this. Sometimes you just need that 5 damage, and this can be a little hard to get off if you can't reliably get a big board. But this deck's also pretty good at getting a big board. Next, we have Green Steel Discard. We don't know exactly where this placed. It was top 16. I know a lot of people thought this deck would just disappear. I'm not really sure why. I don't see anything else that has countered it, per se. I still think if you open Cove Diablo, you're cooking with butter. Like, if it still is an insane opening, especially if you can back him up with Storm Rage on, cards of that nature, and then once you get their hand empty, it's kind of just game over. Granted, it is slower than the old Bucky days. Like, it is not having a Bucky on turn 2 that then immediately makes you discard with a Shift Diablo. So it is slower. I'll give it that. Other than that, pretty standard. I guess here's another criticism you could level at this. If you look, there's no new cards in here. Every single card in this is from set 5 or earlier. There's nothing from set 6 that this deck really got, which is a common thing too. People always want to play with the new toys, and this deck didn't really get anything to add to this list. So still, I think it's potent. It clearly did well, and when it goes off, it still goes off a lot. These decks might want to shift towards the Muses as a way to kind of control the board more. Now with all your songs, the Muses is warded, and now you're bouncing stuff back to your opponent's hand. So a card like Genie, where, yeah, they'll get to draw another card, but if they have to spend 4 ink every time playing this Genie that the Muses then just kick back to the hand, that's really not worth it for the Genie player. So maybe that's a direction this deck could shift into if it wants to stay alive. But hey, if it disappears entirely, I'm also not going to complain about that. Next we have an Amber Steel Song. Hooray! This looks pretty typical. We do have some new toys in this one, so we are in on the full Robin Hood package. I think this package will always be solid until this card just gets 100% power crept. Robin Hood has never been a great play to just put him out on turn 5, but the shift line is so strong. There's just nothing really that can deal with a Robin Hood. Something with 6 health on turn 3. There's just no real efficient card to do that with, other than like a counter shift Jim Hawkins. But you're essentially running a 5-drop into a 5-drop at that point. Simba's been really valued for his just cycling, being able to get a card deeper into the deck. Same with the Doc. Lilo's really good too. This deck can really flood the board with early lore. They have dropped Piglet. Lilo may be kind of taking that spot. A little less vulnerable than Piglet. Still takes 2 to get rid of, but if she dies, you can always bring her back later. So we might just see Piglet kind of disappear from this entirely. And she always threatens 2 by herself, whereas Piglet has to have other characters to keep that lore value. Smee, Ariel, of course, these are all pretty standard. Pluto, again, very strong in this. The Rapunzel for the card draw. This one's on a full 4 Simba. Really interesting. And that's another reason we have the little Simba to shift onto it. I would be curious to know how well this card has performed. I've seen kind of the best and worst of it. It just, I don't know. Sometimes it looks great. Other times not so great. It's actually pretty fun with Lilo. If you revive her and you're able to get an exerted Simba, you'll ready the Lilo and protect her from challenges that way. Other than that, pretty typical songs. I do like World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Helps you deal with if you're against red-blue, which is normally a bad matchup for you. If you have to like take out a Tamatoa, take out a Sisu, something of that nature. Yeah, this looks really solid. Of course, for Whole New World, Zeus. There's always been a few different ways you could build this deck. You could put in like the Queen shift line if you want. I kind of prefer Robin Hood. It's a little less spotty, but I mean, Queen is still amazing when it goes. Yeah, this one just looks pretty standard. Most of the new stuff we got were all characters. Hopefully Ravensburger has learned their lesson and they're not going to keep printing removal effects on songs, because turning characters sideways and getting stuff off the board is very powerful. This one is, ooh, we actually have Sapphire Steel. SS Solar Flare by Justin Morales. Running the new gym. I like that a lot. And we have the shift line. That's cool. This card's pretty decent on its own too, especially if you can ramp. Do we have a Quill? Yeah, so this one is running Quill, which is really good with our Whole New World package. If you can do 2 cards a turn, he's a 4/4 on a 2 cost. That's pretty good. Only when attacking, of course, but still. Still like the Cogsworth. It's, this card will always do what it does, which is that if you're not facing Ruby, it's going to make your matchup pretty winnable in your favor. If you are, well, you're kind of in trouble. Ariel, Robin Hood. Man, haven't seen this card in a minute. So during your turn, the character, oh, he just has evasive, so he can challenge. I mean, it's good. Okay, so it's probably as a Genie tool. Other than that, you can draw a card if the card balance is in your favor in the opponent's hands. It's probably for Genie. I mean, it's just a one of, so it's not like it's a, I don't know. Is there nothing better to take on Genie with? Maybe not. We don't always have a bunch of stuff that can hit evasive. It's inkable at least, so if I were to guess, that would be my big guess why this is in here. It's a 4/4 that can one-shot a Genie. And when you ramp, you could potentially have it out the same turn a Genie comes out, and they just go, boop, goodbye. Cannon, Sail, Vision, yep, all pretty standard stuff. I do like seeing Grab Your Sword still. It's kind of your only really way to control a wide board. And all of our items. Yeah, it's nice to see that this deck still did well. I've always kind of had a bit of a fondness for this deck, even though it's always been essentially the inferior version of red-blue, but yeah, I like this one, and nice to see it getting some performing. Finally, we have a Ruby Amethyst burn list, which is what I've been running at locals lately. This one isn't on the Diablo. I don't know about Moana. I guess, so if you're doing a burn list, maybe she makes sense, right? If you're assuming that you're the one setting the tempo and that they're always going to be chasing you, then this card probably makes sense because I don't see any captains in here, right? Like, there's no way this card's ever going to get to challenge. No. So it's just a 1 cost that says, hey, if you ever answer me, I'm going to probably take out whatever you answer me with, assuming it's early enough. I do also like it for Flynn. It makes it a lot easier for Flynn to trigger on turn 2, or technically what is the start of turn 3. Because a lot of times it's very easy to stop Flynn just by putting, okay, well, here's my own character that has 2 strength. Not a whole lot of characters that early that have 3 strength. So it can help you trigger the Flynn before the Sisu even comes down. Then you add the Sisu on top of it, and boom, you're golden. 4 White Rose, I like this. I may have to check that in. 4 full Genie, going for the full burn Goofy. Full 4 Thievery, Knowledge. Yeah, I love this. I love how just burn heavy this is. I love this. Just get lore, get lore, get lore, get lore. Bosses on a roll. That's more instant lore. Only one's Pirate's Life. That's expensive. This one is not running any locations or Be Prepared, which is a version I've been running. It was a version that did well at, I think, was it Seattle? There was a burn list that got really high up there, and it was running Library and Castle, and it had that Be Prepared top end. This list does not, so this one is definitely way more low to the ground. Like, I am going to go faster than you, which means this one's going to get in trouble if it ever falls behind. But maybe, I don't know, maybe Thievery's enough just to get there and get all this instant lore you can get. So this one looks fun. I like kind of just how simple this is and how streamlined it looks. And one final one, wanted to look at the Steel Song list that Frank Karsten brought. Pretty similar to the other one. This one is running the Ursula, where the other list was not. Well, we don't have any Pluto. Instead, we have Naveen. We actually have I'm Still Here, which is resist and essentially a card draw. It's probably its best feature. A few more Zeus. Big Cinderella, which I still really like this card. I think this card is still very, very powerful. What it can do. A little less sin on the Sima package, but still present. And other than that, this one looks pretty simple. So even Frank said, yeah, the Robin Hood is still the way to go. Like, if you can get that early shift Robin Hood, it's worth putting 8 slots in your deck for. So those are some of the lists. Pretty fun. Looks like it was a very fun event. I enjoyed watching of it what I could. And yeah, these all look nice. So let me know what lists are your favorite. Is there an ink color you wish was represented that you just didn't see, it didn't show up here? And again, I know this isn't a complete full of the top cut, but yeah, these all look enjoyable. I may have to try this version of Burn. This just looks really interesting. It's so low to the ground. I appreciate you watching. Look forward to more deck techs and fun Lorcana content coming out in the near future. And until next time, take care.